Hi everyone, my name is Octavia Marsh, and today I'm going to be reviewing Chapter 14 on video games for Comms 532 at Liberty University. So let's get started with the first slide. So a little background on video games. Video games have grown tremendously and have become very popular throughout the years. So video games are categorized as games with audio, visual, stimulation through a digital media source. They can be found on computers, also on cell phones, most recently on tablets, and also in arcades and even on gaming consoles. The number one top-selling game in 2009 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which exceeded $310 billion in sales in the US, the UK, and Canada combined. These games often lead to sequels, websites, downloadable games, and even action figures and comic books. As you can see here, playing in the background is the sequel to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which is called Call of Duty Black Ops. This one is playing on the PlayStation 3 or PS3, but is also available on all of the current gaming systems. On some of the first video games, joysticks and keyboards were used. Even that technology has grown. This right here that I'm holding up is the controller for the PS3. This one's pink because it's mine and that's my favorite color. But they come in different colors, so they cater to both male and female. This particular controller has an integrated haptic feedback, which basically allows this little thing to vibrate or give different sensor motions while playing the video game. Another advancement in the online gaming is the ability to play online with different users across the different consoles. So, let's talk a little bit about the history of video games and how we've advanced into the technology that we currently use today. So, the history of video games. They can pretty much be divided into 5 main areas. We have the early years, then the rise of the consoles, portable gaming, the console wars, and then pervasive online and mobile gaming. And in the textbook, in figure 14.2, there's a nice diagram that kind of shows the breakdown of the evolution of these video game technologies. So the first gaming concepts were mostly designed for military and government use. So now we'll just spend a little bit of time just discussing the different areas of the 5 stages so that we can see how we've transitioned into where we are today in video technology. So let's start with the early years. So this is like the mid-60s into the early 70s. So as I said before, the first video games were for military and government use. So in the mid-60s, a guy named Ralph Baer developed games for the Department of Defense. Then his team developed the first video game that was able to be played on standard television sets, which was called Chase. So then, of course, once someone develops one technology, the next person that comes along can always use that technology to advance and make something even better. So it wasn't until the early 70s that actual video game was made for consumer use. And it was a dedicated gaming console called the Magnavox Odyssey, and it was an analog gaming system. So it was nowhere near the technology that we have today. And then the first game that was built along in that time was called Pong, and that was built on a microprocessor. So the technology slowly but quickly at the same time started transitioning from analog into digital. All right, let's let's talk a little bit about the next stage, which is the rise of the consoles. So in the late 70s, the Atari came onto the market. So that video game system is most notable. Many of our parents and things like that had Ataris. Um, so that's one that we all are pretty familiar with, I'm sure. So this console was different in that it had gaming cartridges. So that was new because before, in the mid-60s, when that console was invented, it was pretty much just like one game that was built into this console. Whereas with the Atari, there were different games on different consoles, and you could switch the cartridges in and out to be able to play different games. So that obviously was a huge advancement during this time. And then Atari merged with Warner Communications, and as you know, Warner is famous for different movies and things like that. So um, that just advanced the technology to be able to integrate some of these gaming systems with movies and things like that as far as the characters go. So then there's a group called Activision, and they were the first to design games for different consoles. So they started designing games that were for any console coming onto the market, not just the Magnavox or not just the Atari. And so that really, really started to transition gaming where it is today. And most notably, Activision is responsible for the design of Call of Duty, which, as we said before, was like the #1 game in 2009 and still is highly rated today. So in the mid-1980s, that's when gaming really started to advance. So Sega came out with the Sega Master System, and then Nintendo also entered the market, and the Nintendo Entertainment System was actually rated as the best-selling toy in the U.S. in 1987. So that was big news. I know personally that was my first video gaming console, so that's kind of exciting. Then we have computer games that also started coming onto the market. And then the Commodore 64 was a playoff of computer games, and that was the first system that had color. And then we have the Apple Macintosh, which were the first to integrate point-and-click technology. That was more so using like a mouse on computer games to point and click. All right, so the next stage of video game history is portable gaming and console wars. So we're still in the late 80s where this stage is. So Atari, since they were the first pretty much to come out with a big game system on the market, decided that they wanted to integrate a handheld system. So in the late 80s, that's when portable gaming became popular. So the first handheld game system from Atari was called the Lynx. And then slowly after, Nintendo decided they were going to integrate portable gaming by designing the Game Boy. And then Sega was slow to get on the market with it a few years later, but they came out with the Sega Game Gear. So then in the late 1990s, that's when computer technology started to surface a little bit more, and so we have computer games and things being built for Windows 95 processors. And then in the 1995, that's when the Sony PlayStation hit the market. So after that, as you can see from looking at the PowerPoint slides, it was about 6 years later before another gaming console came out on the market, and that's when Microsoft decided that they wanted to see if they could compete with what was already on the market. And so in 2001, Microsoft came out with the Xbox gaming console. And because it had already been about 6 years, Sony wanted to obviously compete with the new technology that Microsoft had. And so Sony came out with their first portable gaming system, which was called the PlayStation Portable, or PSP for short. So most of the video gaming technology has always been about one company competing with the other for sales and doing what consumers what they think consumers will buy. All right. So the next stage is online and mobile gaming. So many of the gaming consoles today, especially the PlayStation and the Xbox most notably, allow users to play online with other users on the same game console. So this technology has really, really expanded since the first video technology was invented. Many of these games will allow users to make purchases to try and advance or level up. So, for instance, on some of our mobile gaming, like let's take for instance Candy Crush, you can purchase different add-ons that could potentially help you um, advance to the next level or things like that. And so there's controversy between that because some people feel like it's just a game, so why should we spend our actual money to advance to a next level on a game that is not real? So that's one area of mobile gaming that has some controversy today. But nonetheless, um, many people take advantage of that because they get into the game and they want to advance and will do whatever they need to at any cost. So computer technology has obviously enabled wireless networking. And so that wireless networking enables users to be able to have that online play and that freedom of gaming. So pretty much all of these technologies combined have really, really made video technology and mobile gaming and things like that what it is today. So it's almost like everything just has a role within the other. So as I mentioned, the last console that hit the market was 2001. So another 5 or so years goes by, and then in 2006, Nintendo hadn't made a console in a while, so they came out with the Nintendo Wii. And so that was big news. This was one of the first gaming systems that had motion-sensitive remote. Earlier, I held up the PlayStation remote, and I told you that that had motion sensitive. But the Sony PlayStation, is not responsible for having the first motion sensitive remote. It was actually Nintendo's concept that made this technology what it is today. Okay, so that's the history of mobile gaming. So now let's talk about some recent developments. So currently on the market, there are 3 gaming consoles. So we have the Nintendo, we have Microsoft, which is the Xbox, and we have Sony, which is the PlayStation, and all of them have portable games, of course. And then there are 3 computer platforms on the market. So most popular is Windows, and then we have Macintosh, and we have Unix, Linux, and those are more so like Apple products. So online gaming sales have definitely increased throughout the years. And another thing is that video games are no longer considered child-oriented. So more adults are starting to play video games. So as you can see, if you've been watching the game in the background, you're probably thinking, wow, there's shooting going on, there's a lot of violence and things like that. But these marketers are targeting adults, not children. So obviously on Nintendo, we think of games that have like Mario and things like that, which we consider those to be child-oriented. But these newer gaming consoles are really targeting the adult user and not so much children anymore. So speaking of adults, in 2005, the gaming technology started to change and a game called Guitar Hero came out. And that was the first console that was based on a musical game. And then we have smartphones, which have enhanced mobile gaming. And so when you consider all of those things, smartphones and music and things like that, these are things that adults would want and that adults would utilize. And so the technology, when you start to think about it, really is geared toward adults. And then, of course, we have broadband networks, which have enabled storefronts online, so you no longer have to go into the store necessarily to make a purchase of a game. As long as you have the console, many of these games can be downloaded or played online or on the computer or things like that. And then the physical interaction and physical characteristic recognition, most notably the what is it? Xbox. On the Xbox 360, they have the Xbox Connect. Sorry about that. And on the Xbox Connect, it has a webcam that it utilizes and can see your movement and can detect what you're doing and integrate that motion into the screen. And then also on Sony for the PlayStation, they have the PlayStation Move, which also integrates that technology. And then Nintendo has like the Wii Fit, and that integrates physical characteristic that can allow people to get on a board and weigh themselves and exercise, and everything, all of your information pops up on the screen, and so it's able to recognize your physical characteristics just by being in front of the television. So that's a huge advancement from where video games were before. So currently, let's talk about the current status of video games. When gaming consoles come out on the market, everyone wants, the games to be backward compatible, because you don't want to have a system that you brought maybe 4 years ago and then you can't use any of those games and then you feel like you wasted your money. So recently, many of the newer gaming consoles allow users to utilize their old games but play on their new system that they bought. And so that makes consumers really feel like they're not wasting money, but they're standing behind the technologies that are being invented. And then software is important because you can easily upgrade software, and sometimes that might be cheaper than upgrading hardware. So like you can buy, new games and not have to buy a new system or things like that. So I look at some of the statistics and the figures. In 2009, there were $77 billion in global sales of video games. And then separately, there was $30 billion in console sales. So that's a good example as well, because that shows that once people have a system, they're spending more money buying different games and things for them. So it's kind of like the system is like the initial investment, and then you can add on by buying new video games and things to go along with your system. So that's huge. That's a lot of money being put into video games. The Interactive Advertising Bureau provides guidelines for ads, exposure, and the audience. So most notably, you would see on video games that they have ratings, and it would identify what age groups the games are intended for, and if they have violence or different things that like parents might want to know about before purchasing a game for their children. And as I mentioned before, the average gamer is no longer at a young age. The average gamer is actually 35 years old and has been playing for over 12 years. So to combat this, the Entertainment Software Association has started to limit the explicit content in games, because there's been some controversy about certain things that were going on in games, and although it's not real, but it's in a game, if a child were to see that, they felt like, is this appropriate? So there's a little bit of controversy there as well. And then electronic sustainability is important because many people, we're all energy conscious now, and we don't want to waste energy by playing video games. And so Consumer Reports and things are really like targeting video game technology and identifying if these games are conserving energy or are they wasting energy and things like that. So that's just some things to think about and take into consideration. And I'm sure that the makers of these consoles are going to have to start taking all of that into consideration as well, because we're starting to live in a society that is really energy conscious, and people aren't going to buy these games and the consoles if they feel like they can't be energy conscious while doing so. So a couple factors to watch. Microsoft only had invented one handheld device, and that was called the Microsoft Zune. That was in 2006. It's 2013. Microsoft has yet to come up with another handheld device, so that could possibly be something to watch. The next thing, Apple, their iPhones and iPads have grown tremendously, but there's so much other technology on the market today that could be something to watch, because they have so much competition now that does the same, if not more, of what their technology is capable of, and people have grown to love. Then you have Microsoft's Project Natal for the Xbox 360, as we talked about, the motion-based gaming. I mean, that's relatively new, in the past 5 years or so, so that technology is sure to continue growing. And then Nintendo, their technology, they had the DSi, which integrated a digital camera into a handheld device, and then they had the Nintendo DS 3D, which enabled 3D technology into their handheld device. So, I mean, that's a technology that these other companies haven't even tapped into yet. And then, strangely enough, 40% of gamers are women, which is a 2% increase from 2008. So, I mean, that shows that it's no longer children and it's no longer just men, but women are equally as involved and excited about video game technology. And as I mentioned before, the first games were for government and military use. Well, today the U.S. Army still uses video games to train. So, I mean, that's fascinating when you think about it, that, someone might be playing Call of Duty or something just for fun, but people in the military are using this technology and these games to actually train and fight for our country. So, I mean, that's amazing. I mentioned some of the legal troubles or issues, but I think that as the rating system progresses and the guidelines start to get a little bit stricter, hopefully some of that will balance out, as far as kids being able to play some of the games that have like a mature rating or things like that. And then the online gaming ability, I think that will probably grow as well, because it's already grown tremendously, and people are really, really taking advantage of that technology by using the voice over internet protocol and things like that to be able to not only play with their friends online, but also talk to one another and things like that while they're playing the game. So let's wrap this up. So, as we know, gaming systems, smartphones, computers, everything has advanced even beyond the publishing of our textbooks. And video game technology has just grown so tremendously over the past 50 years, and I'm sure that it will continue to grow. So, with all of that in mind, I want to hear from you in your discussions. Do you think that video games will continue to be a growing trend among adults? Why or why not? Thanks for listening, and I hope that you all enjoyed my presentation.